kindly please share the live link if it is still participants wants it. Our culture, as it relates to land, as it relates to medicine and plants, our culture as it relates to our livelihoods, and our culture as it also relates to how we, the Nama, saw astrology before the other man came and told us about the moon and the stars. That is our culture. And in today's conversation with this panel, we are dealing with the aspect of our right to that culture as it relates to sharing it fairly and equitably. What I'll ask is that the panelists first introduce themselves shortly and then get into their first initial remarks. Nico, I'll start with you. Your name, what you do, and then get into your initial remarks, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Nicodemus Cooper. I'm a Nama and a citizen of Botswana from the Kalahari Desert, from a community, a small village called Lokwabe. I think I'm factual to say that is the village you find immediately after crossing into Botswana from the Namibian side, immediately after the park. And I say this deliberately to indicate to the viewers and audience how closely related we are and with regards to the shared history. I will comfortably like to introduce myself as a heritage activist for now. Of course, I wear many hats, and for the sake of time, I think I'll be comfortable with that title for now. And maybe just to mention that I also lead an NGO called Namakwen Network of Heritage Advocacy. And with the name, it clearly gives a hint as to the mandate of the NGO. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Nico, what are your first remarks in terms of the topic, our culture, our heritage, sharing it fairly and equitably? Provide your remarks, please.
Oh, yes. Yes, my remarks will firstly to acknowledge the perfect title that the organizers have come up with, because this is for me an everyday title. It has to be a motto, kind of something that we live with every right, because as a person by default, that's a right. You have the right to live, and as a person, if you are living and we given that right, we have the right also to live by your culture. And it is also very important that I may be from a village or a country, but because of the global spaces that we live within, we must also consider the fact that the Nama, wherever they are, they don't live within an island. They live with other communities. And when we talk of heritage, it is very important that we share it fairly. And it is also very important that it is shared sustainably, so that even the future generation gets to benefit or find, solid foundation of the sustainability of our heritage and take it forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Doctor?
Thank you. My name is Taime Sylvester. I am a medical scientist by training. How I ended up here, maybe that'll be the better introduction. How I ended up here is I do a lot of advocacy with regards to biological samples, right, and sovereignty of biological samples, specifically human samples. So what we've seen a lot is that researchers come in and they get our samples, our blood, our tissue, all of that. They come in and they say they want to do HIV, AIDS assistance. They take our samples, they take them to their countries, and they do analysis. After that, they publish papers, they get grants, they benefit from our samples. Or they come into the country and they do testing or experiments or research that we don't fully understand the value of, and then they benefit from it. So I've been doing a lot of advocacy and teaching of doctors and healthcare workers around that. And I've always been passionate about the equitable benefit sharing of biological samples. And also the, I don't want to use the word preservation because of my last comment, but maintaining the integrity of culture and passing that along. And so through the work that I do on the biological side, I was included in the delegation that goes to Geneva, Switzerland, to discuss the pandemic agreement. And the pandemic agreement and the PAPS annex is about how will we get access to medicines or to vaccines when the next pandemic hits, when the next COVID hits. How will we be able to access that medicine? Because people are using our samples to develop, obviously, therapeutics and the diagnostic tests of the vaccine. So it's all about how will we have access to the medicine in an equitable way in relation to how the samples were used of our people. And so that's how I got introduced to the ABS related to biological samples. And so now I'm involved a lot with educating the community in terms of access and benefit sharing, how those two go together, to discuss what can we do on a community level to ensure that we maintain ownership of our traditional knowledge of our, and under traditional knowledge is the plants that we use, the medicines and all of that stuff. So that's how I became involved in this. Thank you.
Is mic on? Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Ek gaan maar Engels praat. I don't have the privilege of having learned the language of my forebears because of many things like colonization and whatever has happened in history. But it's beautiful to see it. Last night when I came here, actually Dirk took me through the festival, and for me it was one of the most beautiful moments that I've gotten to experience, because I got to see, the pride of the people in who they are. I come from a place where your history was something that you were supposed to be ashamed of. So to look down upon it, to discredit it, om over te spoeg, because it's less than. We were taught to believe, our forebears too, that we weren't humans, we were subhumans. And so we had to adopt English and all these different languages just to fit in. So for me to have experienced this, I want to commend Dirk for what he's done. I think you are a pioneer. You've done something that I've never seen before. En dit is 'n riem onder my hart as ek dit so mag kan stel. And yeah, that's the one point. I do want to commend you on that. And thank you for having me to be part of this auspicious occasion. What I do want to say, I've actually written something. I like to stay on track, because if I don't write down, dan sê ek days on goede. There's 3 points that I want to really get across here today. One is we are rich, we are powerful, and this is our time. Those are the 3 points I want to make. So, another thing before I get into the 3 that I want to mention is also we must, and this is part of the conversations I've been having here and in South Africa, is we must not see ourselves as separate. As Nama people, you must not see yourself as separate from the rest of the indigenous people. When I say indigenous, I'm referring to the Korana, the Khoi, the Bushman, all these names and groups that were mentioned. We are one nation across borders. As moenie kyk en sê ons en julle nie. It's ons. It is een nasie across these borders. And that right is guaranteed in Article 36 of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. If you think you are not protected and your stance and your rights are not protected, I'm here to tell you to change your perception and say your rights are guaranteed, whether it is in international law or local law or in the African court or the African Commission, your rights are guaranteed. It's a matter of understanding what those rights are and where the law places you. So last year we had a congress. Firstly, I did say my name. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Larry Varrie from South Africa, Johannesburg. And I lead an organization called the First Nation Advocacy and Litigation Fund, which is under a movement called the Pan-Khoisan Sovereign Movement. Why? Because we believe we are a pan people. These borders that were drawn here are not borders that we drew. They discussed these borders in Europe and they came to draw them here in Africa. We are one people. That is a point that I want to make sure when we leave here, we understand. As ons en julle nie, as ons. So, last year we had a congress, the Pan-Khoisan Unity Congress, because we decided we need to bring people together, which I was the chair. For we had people from Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, and some other countries. And the agenda on that was to unite our people, to make them understand we have a shared history. We share pain, but we must also share a dream. We do share a dream. We must share that vision of realizing that dream. So, this was what, in fact, the media, it was all over the media last year, and what they've described is, for the first time in history, after 500 years of being divided, scattered, and pushed to the edges of society, our people have decided to come together. To take a stance and say, genoeg is genoeg, van hier af gaan ons, we are self-determined people, and we're going to assert and exercise our right to self-determination, because nobody can tell us who we are and what we will become. So, I want to speak also about, I mentioned earlier how rich we are, and that we are powerful people. And when we look at the stats, if I look at the stats, last night I was looking at the stats of Namibia as a government. And what I found there, according to the Namibia Statistics Agency, your very own government's information, from the 2021 Multidimensional Poverty Index report, which UNICEF was involved in, the United Nations and Oxford University, found that 93% of Khoisan-speaking people in Namibia live in multidimensional poverty. That is the highest rate of any other group in this country. 3%, only 3% of English-speaking Namibians live in poverty, compared to 93% of the Nama people. 3% of English-speaking Namibians live in poverty, and 3% of German-speaking Namibian people live in poverty. That means 1 in 4 children, 1 in 4 San children who start school, or another point is 1 in 4 San children who start school complete their secondary education. 1 in 4 children. That is a devastating figure. Only 3% of San communities in Namibia have access to electricity. I'm mentioning these things because ek het gesê ons is ryk mense, but why is the stats showing us how poor we are? This is abject poverty. So, there was a case earlier that I spoke about earlier, about the Richtersveld community, and I'm going to get to the Richtersveld, and just to make my point. In Namibia is recognized as a country that is very, very rich in minerals, extremely rich in minerals. And Namibia is one of the world's primary resources in top-tier diamonds. And according to with the NAMDEP, if it's NAMDEP, which is a joint venture between the Namibian government and the De Beers company and the United Kingdom, they mine diamonds both on the land and from the ocean. There's uranium. Namibia is the world's second largest producer of uranium. There's zinc, there's copper, there's gold, there's lithium, and there's so many more minerals, and I can name all these things in South Africa. This constitutes about 50% of Namibian exports. 50%. These minerals are coming from your land, but you are the poorest people. 93% of you are poor. So, if we don't understand that the land is everything, there was a lady earlier that spoke about the Constitution makes no provision for our land rights. It can't be true. Because if we look at South Africa also has a section 25, and more specifically section 25(7) of the Constitution that speaks about property rights. And within there, they thought that we were defeated when the British people came to South Africa and annexed our land. In fact, that was the case they made in court, in the highest court, in the Constitutional Court of South Africa. We annexed their land and therefore their rights ceased to exist. And the people, Nama people from the Richtersveld, what they've argued in that case was our law, we have our own law, customary law. We practiced this law before colonial powers came to the shores of Cape Town. And then part of the case that they made was, well, we have a title deed system in South Africa. And according to the title deed system, you guys don't have land. The Nama people of the Richtersveld don't have the land because you don't have a title deed for the land. And the court had to say, according to these people's law, the Nama people, they have an independent, separate legal system that is not subject to the common law or other people's law. It is there on top. So the court granted the people not just the land, but the rights, the minerals in the land. And what the court had to do then, the mining company had to pay back all the money that they've made from the land. And they eventually came to a settlement agreement, and the people then got a 49% share. I'm saying this so that if we do not understand that we must know our legal disposition, our legal place in the country, then we're going to be exploited. Then we're going to continue at this 93% poverty margin and not realize the land is ours. And all the minerals that is in the land belongs to the Khoi and the Bushman people. Right? So, that is a critical part that I want to mention. And then I've mentioned with regards to the United Nations, UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is a document that you must familiarize yourself with. I'm coming here today to share with you that we might not lose. In fact, we've always lost the political battles because we do not have the numbers. But what we've realized now is from the First Nation Advocacy and Litigation Fund is when you go to court, everybody's equal. Whether you are the majority or the minority, whether you are rich, whether you are poor, everybody's level with the gravel in court. And so we realized what we must do now is understand how the law sees us and how we see ourselves through the lens of the law. Can we interpret the law to finally be able to exercise the rights that we believe are ours? And if we can, then we pursue the courts and we say, right, this is our disposition, this is who we are, this land is ours, all the diamonds that we mined here belongs to the people. So that's one of the points I want to mention is we must realize we do not have to be a poor people. The land, Europe was made the continent that it is with our minerals. If we do not understand the value of what is here, then it's our loss. But if we can come to the realization that we are not poor, we are rich, because the land and the minerals belongs to us, then our disposition will change and how we see ourselves will change.
Yes.
I've raised the point I said earlier, third point, we are a powerful people. We must change our minds about ourselves. How we see ourselves needs to change. Then how we act will also change. How we defend ourselves will change. What our disposition is will also change. So, we have been told for over 500 years, since colonization has started, that we are at the bottom of the chain. We've even read you the figures that shows you, julle is daar, right at the bottom. The owners of the land are right at the bottom. That we are behind, that we are primitive people. that we are subhuman people, that we cannot develop and move forward. We must leave that to Bantu people and white people. They are progressive people. The rest of you, you're primitive. You can't develop yourself. Right? That is the stigma that is placed on us. And that the development and modernity and the wealth belong to the people, to other people, and whatever is left, we are lucky to have. We are made comfortable with the crumbs when everything on the land, and I'm reiterating these points because these are the things I want you to leave with today, is that this is ours. We have absolutely no reason to be living in the conditions that we are living. So, that is the point I want to hold on to, is understand there's the Hoodia case. I don't know if you've ever read on the Hoodia case and the Rooibos, the benefit sharing agreements that were made. But in terms of our IKS, our indigenous knowledge systems, our people have benefited, not the way we were supposed to benefit, but let it be proof that there are ways that we can start reclaiming our position in society.
Yes.
We must not see ourselves as backward people. We must not see ourselves as ons gaan in die hoek en bly. We must be able to compete with the rest of the world because we are capable. We have all of the means to do that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Q?
Good afternoon again, everybody. I'm Craig Q7 Beckett. I'm a SAN youth leader and developer as well as researcher. Currently, my work is on migration, the ecology of migration. And within the ecology of migration, I work within the ecology of distant relatives through art forms, meaning silent language. And I would like to read you something, and it kept me up all night because before I got here this morning, I practically haven't slept. There's a discussion like this happening in India, and I was part of that panel as well this morning. Our culture, our rights, sharing heritage fairly, sustainably, and reconnecting the broken cultural strings that unite and strengthen indigenous heritage. I'd like to first thank the Goku for having me, and especially Sima Leipert for being my mentor, my guide, my mother, my best friend, and my go-to place when I'm silent. She has taught me how to be a man that cries from inside. And it is very important that I have to note that her work within me is what got me here today. I'd also like to thank Cultural Survival for actually getting me here and making this a youth thing as well. Our culture is more than tradition, it's memory, it's language, identity, wisdom, and belonging. It lives in our songs, our stories, our clothing, our ceremonies, and in the values passed from one generation to the next. Culture tells us where we come from and reminds us who we are. But across many indigenous communities, cultural strings have been broken through displacement, colonization, inequality, loss of language, and erosion of tradition knowledge. Too often, indigenous voices have been ignored while others benefit from our heritage without respect, recognition, or fairness. That is why we say today, our culture is our right. We have the right to preserve our traditions, the right to protect sacred knowledge, the right to speak our languages, the right to share heritage on our own terms, and the right to ensure the future generations inherit not silence but pride. Very important. Sharing heritage fairly and sustainably means creating partnerships built on respect, not exploitation. It means recognizing indigenous communities as custodians of knowledge, not simply subjects of history. It means ensuring that cultural expression benefits the people from whom it comes from only. When we reconnect the broken cultural strings between communities, we build unity. We discover common histories, similarities, shared struggles, and collective strengths. Indigenous heritage is not divided by borders. It's connected through humanity, resilience, and wisdom. Our elders carry our roots. Our youth carry our future. And together we carry responsibly. Let us invest in cultural education. Let us protect indigenous languages and support our artists, storytellers, knowledge keepers, artisans, tradesmen. Let us create spaces where culture is lived, respected, celebrated every day, not just Nama Festival today. Today, let us, let us commit ourselves to strengthening indigenous heritage, not only for our indigenous people, but for all humanity. Because when culture is lost, the world loses part of its soul, and when culture is protected, it's shared with respect, the world becomes richer, wiser, and more connected. Our culture is our identity, our heritage, our strength, and our rights must always be protected no matter what. Sometimes progress feels like a curse, dragging along. That's due to us lowering our gaze. We need to lift the heads of the youth up in memory of our ancestors. We are the living dreams of our ancestors and the prayers of our elders. I have traveled Africa flat. I am now found in India traveling, assisting them and their culture and their rights and their protections. And it is very important to realize that in today's world we are where we are today. People like myself, JP, the panel, sometimes we get tired of being turned away by our own. It is a sad fact. Southern Africa has lost me to Namibia again and to India. And this comes due to not understanding the pressures in the field of what he goes through, I go through, he grow, or her. Her work is in gene. What she can teach us is beyond what any book can without using a book, using my DNA. We should be having great conversations with her. Great conversations, like testing the bones to see if it is ours. Things people are not thinking about. If you are to protect your culture and the right to your culture, it's not just the young man or the young woman, it's not just the elder, but it's the environment that you are doing this in. I've seen great Nama leaders over my time. I'm only 47 years old. I've been doing this work since 8 years old. I don't have a life. I have a lifestyle. This is my lifestyle. And that research over the years has brought us closer and closer. I've seen over the years how close to each other we become. But the area and the space we're becoming closer to is becoming violent. Why? Because not only do we believe in laws and policies, we commit to them. How dare you commit to that and yet you are an indigenous person with your own law? Your law has never been respected, but you respect that Roman Dutch law so tough that you are scared. If there's one thing as a leader I've been taught by my great-grandfather and my grandfather, is the indigenous of Southern Africa changed its happiness for fear, and some of us is banking on the fear. For things like stipends and handouts, government handouts. I'm one of the leaders that would not feed a child with a government handout. I'm a medicine man. I go out in the world and I create great medicine. Great medicine. I deal with cancer, leukemia, mental illnesses, where a plant leads me to that person and their wellness. That money I feel so proud to when I hand over. I paid for medicine last night, me and the brother, almost 1,000 rands medicine. Did we buy the medicine, my brother?
No. When it comes to indigenous knowledge, we exchange. We come from a barter system and not from system of money. So we don't buy, we donate.
Exactly. I'm spending my stipend of cultural survival, almost 3,000 rand at the Nama festival. Why? Why didn't I buy food, clothes, a Nama shirt? Why am I not in a Nama shirt? Because those things doesn't help me identify who I am. But sharing, giving that woman the money and getting a smile and a hug, that takes me home to grandma, where my lessons started. Today we have elders, we all spoke about it. They're vanishing. Some of them are just gone silent. They're still alive, but that silence right now is killing our community. And if you ask them, why are you silent, Ma? She says, I can't recognize anything Nama or Bushman. We're pretending because we need to smile and keep it up. You don't need to smile and keep it up. Being Nama is painful. Being San is painful. We come from a terrifying history. And that terrifying history has got a beautiful background. It didn't start like that. And we didn't lose it all. The world makes you think this. I'm into internet work, where we do A/B testing. We show you the same thing, two different places, and people are fooled. They think they're going a different route when they're all meeting up in the same route. That's what happened to us. A/B testing, South Africa versus Namibia, and who and what we are. Botswana, the rest. A form of political A/B testing. We've now adopted that A/B testing in our house, where we speak Nama to one child and English to the other child. Where we have our elders saying to Nama woman, to the other Nama woman, Goeiemorgen, but they Nama speaking. So the youth are learning all these bad habits from y'all. I'm a youth leader, I have to be truthful. Their mental state depends on your correction of the culture in front of us. When we were small, didn't you all hit us? Julle moenie tande tel nie. Now where's that respect today? Because what? You're scared your child's going to call child line. Is that the case? You're scared your child's going to make a case against you for child abuse. Is that the case? We say no to corporal punishment, yes. That's political. That's colonizing. The same way I don't like people calling me sir, ma'am, all those things. It's a political title. It's colonizing. Like the word chief. We got gaubs, kaiga. Not chiefs. That is colonial. The more we say this colonial hidden words and silent actions and gestures of us, how are we going to correct this? How? We're going to repeat this topic next year, this time again then. What progress does that old lady? We don't know if we're going to see her again. Most of them are saying things they haven't openly said even to their own children because they want to share. Are we taking really note of this? Or are we just taking notes like students in varsity that takes notes and just gets a PhD from taking notes?
In that line, Q, when the Namibian constitution, which I've called always a compromised constitution, and the reason why we call it compromised constitution is it's because it's different from yours, and that's why you can go to court and win as Richtersveld. While in this country, because property is protected under Article 16 of the Namibian Constitution, there are two conditions that are set out in the Constitution of how me as a Nama that has lost land in this country can get back to perhaps getting it from government. Two, one, and it is in the Constitution. It says the only way we can get this land back as government is in the Constitution. Two things. One, willing seller, willing buyer. The white man and the German that took the land by force must first be okay one morning to say, ek moet die grond verkoop aan die Namas regering, laat die Namas grond kry. He must wake up with that thought, be willing to sell the land without inflating the prices, without putting middlemen in place, which government usually would do because they are assessors, and inflating the prices. At times, government says he does not have the money, therefore farms are not bought, or government buys up farms in areas that are not conducive, and then through the settlement program, it's supposed to be dispersed. But even then, those that were dispossessed of the land are not prioritized. The second way of getting that land back is expropriation. I've said in many committees of prime ministers and ministers, and this is one language that I can assure you. It was said by the Minister of Lands. Our preferred way of getting land back is through willing seller, willing buyer. So under a country that has protected the land, the medicines of ours which are on there, because when the ABS law was passed in 2017, it did not work retrospectively. That's why the top that are sitting with this situation of Nara having been misappropriated. We have the Hoodia situation that Hoodia that grows on our farms and grew on our farms, now we need a license from government to harvest that Hoodia and sell that Hoodia. There are women sitting here with Hoodia. I told one yesterday, careful, do you have license? Don't let others see you, because that's the fear that we're living in while we are Nama on our land, it grows there. The ABS Act was passed 2017. It says, before you come and extract my blood and go use it, Before you come and take my plant from Sanghoop and take it, when you speak to Oma Katrina and ask her about the hut and how she must build the hut and what she's doing, you must first do community consent. That's what the law says. It says, agree with the person what the benefit sharing will look like. Even with that law being passed in 2017, Mr. Appropriation continues. What is it that while the law is on paper and implementation looks differently, how is it that courts can help in that case? And I'm painting a Namibian case now. How is it that courts can help? And what other legislation is there internationally besides UN DRIP, because it has not been ratified in this country? So speaking about indigenous rights in this country is laughed at the same way we are not taken seriously, because we don't have a legal standing to take them with UN DRIP. The court saying, while the Namibian constitution allows international law, it is still not allowed. That's why people go to Talk Tribe and intends on doing green hydrogen and has never had conversation with the Ama or the Nama. What is it that should happen differently in the case of Namibia? We've been to courts. The constitution is not our friend because it's compromised. It has been created to serve the master that took the land from us. So in the space of laws and policies and ordinances speaking against you and what you stand for, and international, having gone to New York, having lost in New York courts with the same case, because of the arguments, what is there still around legislation that can be utilized from your spaces that you work in, from a perspective of the genes, from a perspective of the space that you're in terms of litigation and law? What is it that you are seeing in Namibia, laws that you would know, international laws that you can relate back? Q, in the spaces of indigenous knowledge that you're working in, what are the things that Namibia can learn from and can utilize to move beyond the point that we find ourselves in now with our laws and get wins?
I think before we go back there, let me give you a situation, for example. How many people are here? Right, again, there's more women than men. It's a good time to say it. My brother, like you mentioned, mining. Right up the road, there's a uranium mine and it's leaking water into the water table. Do you understand that out of these women here, some of them got cancer? Some of them know people who gave birth to birth defects, children that is not functioning. Further down the road, there is lead poisoning. Children are breathing in dust and falling on the dust. Now, the fact that these are children and pregnant women, I can tell you the birth rate in Corridor also dropped. From Karas right down, Hardap right down, the birth rate dropped due to mining fossil fuels out of the ground that we would never dig up as indigenous people. We never knew these things. And today we're basing our value on fossil fuels. Green hydrogen is as good as the uranium. It doesn't benefit us, it just makes us sick. That's the only way you're going to benefit. I was part of a study 2009. Well, not part of a study. I read the document 2009. My sister, I think you'd love to read it. It's called The Colonization of African DNA by a university in America. Now, I can openly say I'm no more revolutionary. I have my reasons. I'm not well anymore as a young man. I got hurt. But that indigenous person in me is revolutionized and weaponized due to one reason. Every law we tried to learn or adopt or come closer never reached us. Y'all are old men. How many UNs you want to go to? How many workshops you want to go to, and what and who, what we need? What we're talking about now, we spoke 10 years ago also about this. From Richtersveld right up to the Northern Cape, Kuruman section, Katu. It hasn't changed. And the reason why it hasn't changed is because we're not looking at what our strength is. The Gaups taught me. It took lots of men on horses to prove their point. They created war against their oppressor. Now, today our oppressor is technology, these rooms called parliament and things like that, and these laws everybody votes for. What has it changed? Please, whether it's SWAPO, ANC, DA, LM, what has it changed if we are still here doing these talks?
Larry?
Thank you. Look, I think we can openly differ with each other where it's merited. And I want to strongly differ with my friend here next to me. One of the things that I want to encourage people is not to encourage others to not get involved in technology and AI. And I hear the negative, remarks about AI. AI is the future, whether we like it or not. And we must be part of the development of the world. We are not, and I'm not saying anything else that we're doing is less than. The world is here. The world is technological. If we push away from technology, then we're going to sit with a problem. Then the world is going to advance, and we're constantly going to find ourselves in the position that we do right now. So that's the one point that I do want to say. We must be developmental conscious while we are also focused on restoring, ourselves, our dignity, figuring out who we are, where we come from, all these things, our cultural practices and so forth. But we must never isolate ourselves from the development of the future. We are capable, we have the means, we have the resources. Whatever is being built in Europe, we can build it here with our own resources. What's happening right now is they take raw materials, go and make whatever products, manufacture it in China, and then you buy the very same products in the country. The chairs we're sitting on are built with technology. Everything, the rings, whatever it is, these things are technology, and technology has evolved over time with different machinery and so forth. I'm just emphasizing this point so we understand we must be part of where the world is going to, and we can lead the development of the world. We are the first people of the world. Everybody comes from us. So if we want to isolate ourselves from where the world is going, and we're saying, no, the world is going there, we are going here, where are we going to find ourselves? So that's the one point I just wanted to say, respectfully. And when it comes to courts, you see, the law is designed in a manner to produce justice. Anybody that sits on the bench is a justice. They call justice, whatever this Justice Varrie or whatever the surname is, because their duty is to be a vanguard of justice. So our responsibility, and this is what we do. You see, I've engaged the Vice President of Namibia a couple of times. I've sat with the presidents of South Africa. We've actually had fights, me and the presidents of South Africa. Because we understand people try and colonize us or recolonize us to think that the law, we don't have laws, we don't function on a legal system, and that the laws don't apply to us. That's the lie we've been hearing for the last 30 years. We must begin to read the law and interpret the law to benefit us. You see, any lawyer that goes to court goes to interpret the law. He reads, he cites an Act 115 or whatever, and then interprets what that law means in accordance with what his relief is that he seeks from the court. So we need to change our mind on how we see the law. The law is an empowering tool. If we see it as a disempowering tool, then we won't use the law to our advantage. But if we see it as an empowering tool, then it can do everything that we want it to do for us. And the reason why, and I'm going to go back to the Richtersveld case, you see, there was no legislation that was in place with Richtersveld. There was no law, absolutely no law, that was codified and legislated by Parliament that could enable the Constitutional Court or the lower courts like the High Court and the Supreme Court of Appeal to give a ruling in the manner that it did. It was the interpretation of the law that says, no, daai ding wat julle vir ons sê die wet, kykie, it doesn't accommodate us, is a lie. This is how the law accommodates us. Now, I'll take even further, which you've mentioned, the Namibian Constitution also makes provision for international law. In South African law, Section 39 of the Constitution speaks about any law or any ruling or any way the court interprets anything must be informed by international law. So if we look at international law, whether it's ratified or not is not the issue. It will be better if they're ratified, but it is what is the standard of international law. You see, you can write a law in your country that says babies can be killed, but how does that match up to international law? If you measure that against international law, that is where the scrutiny takes place. Another case, there's so many cases. If you go to the Ogic case that was done in the African courts on human and people's rights, the case there was whether people had the right to traverse this country and another country. And the people found that because of the customary law of the people, whether the law make provision for it or not, they were then able to win the case. The expansion of the port, they've already signed a 13 million or 13 billion, I can't remember what it is now, where the European Union has signed an agreement to invest in the expansion of the port. Now, the people were not consulted, and it could be that even the legislation of the country makes provision for them to do that, because the Namibian government has already budgeted for it through parliament, and everybody's given the go-ahead. The people said, no, this is not going to happen. So if that has to go to court, what do we do? Are we just going to, let it be, complain from the side? No, there are tools we can use to change the narrative. We go to court and we say, right, what is the right of the people here? Dis mos nama mense wat daar begrawe is. Do we have a right? Then we look at things like FPIC, free, prior and informed consent. Do they have the consent? That's an international benchmark. No law regarding indigenous people can be passed where the parliament, the NCOP, whoever writes those, they can't pass it. Why? They never consulted with the people concerning. So that's my point, that's my plight. We are now currently in the Constitution. The Constitutional Court is the highest court in South Africa. I'm litigating in the Constitutional Court, in the High Court. We have many cases that we've taken to court where there is no provision. There's no provision in the Constitution as it stands that makes explicit accommodation for the Khoi and San. So we interpret sections 212, sections 211, section 235 to say they make provision for us. We interpret it to give that. We go back to section 39 to say, okay, yes, it speaks about international law. How do we consolidate all of this information to make our case and say, you cannot do that? You understand?
Larry, I need your judges of the Constitutional Court to be on our benches, because I can assure you this much. Justice is not something that we have gone to these courts and have hoped in the benches that it'll be true justice. And we come from a space of having tried and tested that bench so much to know that perhaps justice on that bench has not been born yet. So maybe one day a Nama child will be born or will be sitting on those benches, and well, one day justice will prevail for the Nama. I want to hear, Doctor, this thing of blood. Now I'm afraid to go even do blood, who they say, testing in blood. Tell us in terms of what you have found. You have told us the work that you're doing. What is it that we can do further? The festival, the NTLA, the Nama that are in here, that are hearing, those that are hearing here. What is the sort of message in terms of the work that you're doing moving forward that we can look at that this misappropriation does not continue, especially in the sector?
Thank you. I want to first touch on this conversation because I feel like we're not exploiting our resources. And I don't just mean the resources that are in the ground. I mean, where is that Nama child that has that law degree? Because they are here, right? When we're talking about the Shark Island expansion or the port expansion, right? Even if there are no bones that are still found at the bottom of shore, on the coast, it still is a heritage site. It still has cultural significance. But you are not exploiting your resources. And I'm going to put my husband in an uncomfortable position, as I always do. My husband is a geophysicist. He's looked at the port. He's looked at why the port cannot be expanded there, why it does not work for the oil expansion in that current location. His father's from Beersheba. Nee. So there is a child of Narma origin who is a resource in this fight, right? We don't have the same land laws, right? That we had a land conference in 91 where the government decided that we would rather not look at the ancestral lands. But, and I may get in trouble for saying this, but Dirk said it's fine, you can make controversial statements. Where was the land taken? It was in the central and the southern regions. That's where the land was taken. And when the land was taken, it was dispersed amongst, I think, 3,500 mostly white farmers, right? So that is where the wealth sits. Land was not really taken in the north. There were different ways that the communities in the north were restricted, right? And that they were sort of captured. But when the land conference came, that is the decision that our government made. When, again, in the late Honorable Hagikainkop's time, there was another land conference, this topic about ancestral lands came up again. But there was not the political will to take on this. And the law only reflects what the political will is. That to say, in that same breath, I want to say that the law is not a stagnant thing. It can be changed, right? But that also takes political will. And it takes us to be, and I want to use the word that was used when the ladies were speaking earlier, militant, but in the right kinds of ways, right? You need to make sure, because you know when a woman is very passionate about what she's doing, people say she's emotional, she doesn't know what she's talking about. So in that same way, we can't be seen as emotional communities that don't know what they're talking about, right? We have to come with facts, we have to come with our evidence. And unfortunately, we do have the traditional authorities, but they support government. And so we had a case, I think in Chumep, where it was almost traditional, brought to the traditional authorities, if I'm not mistaken. And it was dismissed because it was almost, you're bringing a case against yourself. So we have to really scrutinize the law and see where is it that we need to take advantage of our resources and how do we actually build the case. I'm completely now taken by this militant action here. But we have to think about how are we building what we want to build. The other thing about documentation, you cannot prove what you have not documented. And this is something that goes to the traditional knowledge, it goes to our biological resources. If you cannot prove this is our knowledge, and it's not just in the storytelling, and that is where we unfortunately failed, is that it was only verbal storytelling. But now with tools, and I do want to also say that AI can help us. We have to understand how to use it, build tools that have the indigenous person in the center, culturally appropriate tools for us. But we have to document what we have and what we own. And then we can say, but this is our kamaku, this is how it's being used. Because devil's claw is harvested and you get $20, Namibian dollars maybe per kilogram. Namibia is the largest supplier of devil's claw globally. It's being sold, I think it's a $200 million US dollar industry. $200 million. What are we getting here? This is what the ABS is about. It's about equitable access and benefit sharing. So when someone accesses any biological sample and they commercialize that, then there has to be equitable sharing. And that's where the community protocols come in. And the community sits and decides how are we going to respond to people that come in and want to access either our knowledge or our resources. And we sit together with the council and we say, but we want, this is how they must approach us. This is the benefits that we have. And that is written up. And Ministry of Environment can help the communities with that. And I think it's called biocultural protocols. And that's how people say, okay, this is what it is. But unfortunately, with our colonialization, or when we were colonized, we thought, okay, each to his own now. So I'm just going to make a deal and I'm going to sell to these guys. Instead of actually saying that, let's think about what will happen in the long run. And at the genocide memorial that happened in Ludritz, and I actually expected Auntie Valerie to be here to translate, because that was so phenomenal. I mean, people were speaking in English and Afrikaans, and there she was translating. And I think that is what we lose. There has to be, like there's a translator to French or to English or whatever. Why is there not a translator here to involve the entire community, right? That was something so powerful for me. But when we were speaking there, we said that when we speak about reparations, we have to think about how are we going to build something with that will have longevity. How do we build a Nama Center of Excellence for the youth? To say, let us document the knowledge that the elders are giving us, and let us prove that this is ours, right? And yes, of course, the boundaries that we have drawn, that is imaginary lines, right? Last night I heard about Cornelius Fredericks and the letters that he wrote for safe passage for some Nama children and women during the genocide so that they could flee to South Africa and different areas, and how we've now traced those people back here. Yeah. So I think that's very important for us to document everything. I also, I'm going to take advantage of having the mic because the guys did that, and so now I can also. Also, the customary law. We do have customary law, but the way that our legislation, and I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, it is only, and I think that one of the honorable members said it earlier, only if it does not conflict or go against the national law, then only are you able to exercise that. So I think that that is also an issue that we have. And I think one of in the last discussion as well, the honorable councillor said, maybe our parents also failed us because they didn't speak to us in, our native languages, and they gave us names like Taime and Antonio and JP, So, but the thing is, you have to have grace also, and you have to understand the time that our parents were alive in, right? Because they were hustling, they were trying to make money. So how do we shift the narrative? How do we even shift the economy to say, let us try and get money from our resources? How do we develop this research center, this traditional research center where we are testing our own medicinal plants with our own scientists who are interested in what we can benefit, so that drives the economy? How do we drive the economy in the South so that our parents, so that we don't, and our children don't have to be hustling in Windhoek or in Geneva or in New York, so that we can sustain a livelihood here, and not just sustain, but thrive, right? And I think that those are also some of the conversations that we should be having, as we go along.
Thank you, Doc. Nico, you have been following and I trust that you have heard the question that I've asked, but I want to add with you. You are getting me. You've heard the others speak. You've also heard the question that I was asking them, but I want to add with you. The subject matter speaks about our culture, our right to that culture. But the defining part of it is to say that we must share it fairly and equitably and sustainably, and utilize it sustainably. In the work that you are doing in Botswana, you've been to Namibia, you've been to South Africa, you are seeing the situation, you've been around the world, and you've worked with indigenous, even through EPNASA. What is the difference between what the oppressor took from us and is not sharing with us, and what we are doing with each other, taking from each other, misappropriating from each other, stealing from each other, selling out each other? How is that? Who sells out who more? And how big of a problem is us stabbing each other in the backs around selling our indigenous knowledge to others while the community knows not?
Thank you, JP. Yes, indeed. In my next life, I don't think it's advisable to join this kind of panel virtually. And I think joining from my end, I'm getting delayed conversations or contributions, but it is what it is. As I contribute to your question, JP, the panelists have said a mouthful. They brought those necessary, technical interventions, and indeed, it is true of the challenges that they speak. But I want to confine myself to the festival, the impact of this festival, and of course, zoom into the theme that speaks about our heritage, our rights, and the sustainability. I think now what we need to do, perhaps, as something that comes in a report or the evaluation of the festival organizers, is when they reflect on the discussions and then we talk, they zoom into a discussion like ours, one would then ask, but what will be that particular project, a sustainable project for that matter, that recognizes indigenous peoples in this region? Because I'm confining myself to Southern Africa, specifically the mentioned countries, Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. What is it that really brings us on board? What are the untapped fruits, the low hanging fruits that are there that really, because of the impact of events like Nama Cultural Festival, which are now happening in all three countries, what is it that really, if we exhaust and come up with a perfect or ideal, rather an ideal is a better word, a model that will really move us towards that equitable benefit sharing within our projects? And I'm saying this because I'm looking at Hardap region, I'm looking at Karas region, I'm looking at Kalahari region in Botswana, and I'm looking at the immediate region on the Southern African side, which is Northern Cape. And I know the shared heritage covers Western Cape and so forth. But if I'm going to confine myself in the Kalahari Sand Basin, and then we know, all of us, without any argument, this is the place in which you find our indigenous communities in numbers. And we are not denying the fact that there are other communities within us, but there is a lot of untapped heritage projects that really lie there. And because of lack of recognition to some extent as indigenous peoples to these respective lands or states becomes the bigger hindrance. And I'm going to unpack this as I go forward, because recognition is very important in the sense that when people recognize these indigenous peoples in their ancestral lands, that's the first solid foundation, because post recognition, then participation becomes a demand. Naturally, you will then have to, participate, involve these indigenous communities in whatever that seeks to empower their lives, to improve their lives, and other factors that are related to heritage. And now when we go to respective countries, then you find that there is a narrative that all of us are indigenous. It poses a challenge in our legal frameworks. It poses a challenge in recognizing those people indigenous to those specific lands. And when you go international, you then find a gap again. JP, you spoke of the UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That is an international resource, not even binding. And because it's not binding, you find our countries, having to sign these UNDRIPs because they know once they sign or once they just show allegiance, then people will then say, wow, well, this country is human rights based driven, because they subscribe to international protocols. But there is one international resource that is really binding, and that is ratifying ILO 169. That is the only international treaty that is binding, that once respective countries ratify this section, then they will be forced to indeed close the gaps in exactly what we are speaking about today, recognizing indigenous people, involving them, and doing everything that is necessary to improve the rights of indigenous peoples and actually making them own what belongs to them. So that is where the trick is. And this is where now NGOs must not cease the advocacy. Nobody said these things are going to be easy. Even if our forebearers spoke about this many years ago, we must continue to speak about them, because we may walk slowly, but as long as we move forward, there has to be change. And I want to say this, I wrap up my point, that right now in Botswana, this may be something that people view differently. In the previous administration, all of us were seen as indigenous peoples, and no one ever wanted to recognize a specific community as more indigenous than the other. But we do have a new government who has changed a narrative, who really subscribes, and it seems they understand the contents to the core, what UNDRIP seeks to achieve, what ILO 169 seeks to achieve. And I said it that countries do not ratify ILO 169 because of the binding factor. And in Africa, there is only one country that has ratified that. And Botswana has, of recent months, declared its intention to ratify ILO 169. It has pronounced publicly to be recognizing the San and the Nama as indigenous peoples, because there is a context in which African Union uses in defining who indigenous peoples are. To some extent, it is not about who occupied that land before the other, but because it is indigenous people, those communities who have gone through historical injustices, and to date, they continue to be left behind economically and otherwise. That is the context that people and governments and states must understand. And if Botswana does happen to ratify it, Botswana will be the second African country to have ratified ILO 169. And this should be able to speak to Southern Africa. If one country within us has managed to take a bold step like that, indeed, it must help to shape or change the narrative and mindsets to see that this is actually possible. We may have lost what we've lost, but really there has to be some way in which how we repair the injustices that have done before, so that we are able to be recognized, involved in participation, and be able to make those tailor-made interventions to see to it that we are able to restore that can be restored today. And I think if you look at the region, as I said, within these four regions that I mentioned, Hardap, Paras, Kalahari District, and Northern Cape, there's something beautiful that is laying there that is untapped. And if the three countries, rather before the countries even get involved, because they have existing bilateral relations, it's an issue of them looking at these bilateral relations and see, but what is it that speaks to heritage, that speaks to participation and recognition, that we can really revamp, give life to it, and be able to take advantage of the impact that this Nama cultural festivals, and not only Nama cultural festivals, there are other festivals and activities aligned to heritage that really they can be packaged in a beautiful way, and our communities may be able to reap benefits from the lemon that has been within us, and turn it to lemonade. As I close, really, I want to say this, that Botswana in the past few years, mentioned
Yes, while we're getting back, what I'll do is follow
that
up.
South Africa, yes, South Africa also had what they called Khoisan heritage trade. And I know Namibia has got a lot more of interesting sites of heritage. Now, if our local authorities are presented of these issues, and then tripartite potential projects, are envisaged, are implored, definitely there has to be something very special that will come out based on the impact of the events that are happening. The Nama festivals, the Sen cultural festivals, and so forth. Thank you for taking your time, JP.
Thank you very much, Nico. I will open to the floor, the panelists, your remarks and your answers to the questions. You will be up next. To the floor, we've got 1, 2, 3 hands, starting at the back.
Okay, I don't want to go in with the court case of the Rechtersveld because dis nie maanskin en rose nie. Dis glad nie maanskin en rose nie. Ek gaan net kortlik sê, ons is kaalgat miljonairs. Okay, 'n paar jaar gelede het ek saam met Ego Afrika, ons het warmbad, kamersep, Perseba goed gedoen aan die suide van Namibia en ons het oorgrensbesoeke gehad. So ek wil graag net versoek dat wat hier uitgaan, moet die tema wees, die rivier wat verdeel maak weer heel. Want die suide van Namibia saam met Rechtersveld is familie van mekaar. Ek soek nog steeds vir Salmon Boys.
Baie dankie. Môre middag, Geidera. Ek kom I just want to reflect on one thing. And since we are talking about the rights of our people in gaining access to equitably benefit, the challenge that we sit with is, we spoke about courts. Now I'm going to come there. Is that Namibia did not gain an outright independence. That is the first and foremost challenge. So through Resolution 435, our independence was negotiated. So few compromises were made. So when the compromises were made, it was also made on some legal frameworks. Now, I've been exposed in nature conservation for some time. And I was privileged to work in the IIS Richterveld Transfrontier Park. Our people, the Nama people, benefited to a certain extent from the Transex mining operations. I don't know if it still exists, because that was gained through the indigenous people's rights, as I presume when I was down there. The employment as well as the operational profit sharing. Now, when we come to the Namibian context, our justice system is the same like putting the devil in hell. Because we have subscribed to international treaties, however, the political influence is our biggest challenge. Yesterday, when I made a remark, I asked, can we not come at a place where we challenge and get our things right? In the SADC platform, and I'm going to jump on the train of my brother Nico, Botswana is the only country that wants to ratify the past wrongs. Our African leaders who have subscribed to these international treaties and conventions are failing to join the wagon of the Botswanan president. When you talk about the oil that is found in the Orange River Basin, we, in terms of as Namas and people living in this area, will never benefit. Why? Because of the international treaties. How the deal is negotiated, and we need to be in good faith and those lot of things. In our diamonds, nothing. Our leaders are part of the government setup in terms of recognition. And I've made it yesterday, and I didn't want to go deeper into it. But I need to make it clear in terms of benefiting from our resources equitably. Okay, I'm wrapping up. Now in the north, those leaders don't subscribe to what our southern leaders are subscribing to. And I'm coming from a lineage of Gaup Joseph Fredericks III. And when he was captured, back in the day, as I was taught by my elders, that's when the ordinal plans have started and our land was taken away. So even if you go and challenge it now, the international treaties and the negotiated independence bars you from fighting it. Robert Mugabe was one perfect example of a president that stood by the agreement, because after 10 years, the colonialists were supposed to return what's rightfully the Zimbabweans' property and give them access. Now, our governments, the South African government and the Namibian government, have never revisited Resolution 435 as well as the Lancaster Agreement. Now, we as Namibians and as youth, yes, should sit around the table. We know the challenges, we know the past wrongs, but us, we need to find a way that we can deal with the situation by getting our leaders to understand consciously that being part of the government is part of the biggest problems that is actually hampering our natural heritage and benefiting from our resources. I think that is the direction we need to go as young people that is concerned about our future.
The only reason why I went beyond 30 seconds with councillor is we are in councillor's town. Okay? We don't want problems with councillor. Please. Go, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was now sitting thinking about how do I do this as short as possible? How do I respond to some of the issues that is running in my mind? Okay. The one thing that I have a particular interest is the access and benefit sharing kind of arrangement. Now, what I find maybe a little bit problematic there is this issue around UNDRIP. There's a section article, I think it's Article 34, that talks about the indigenous people have the right to their land and to use their resources as they please. But then on the other side, you sit with the Ngonya Protocol that basically is in contestation with Article 34 that says, but the government must be the go-between the people and the resources. And that is what we now see in South Africa with the Rooibos Tea Agreement. There's the farmers, they pay a levy to the government, they have a trust, and then from the government trust, they then divide between the San and the Khoi people. And at the very end, a small portion of the total benefit ends up with the people. So for me, that's a bit problematic. The other issue that I picked up in the discussion is the issue of legislation. On South African side, we have the constitution that talks about Section 235, the right to self-determination. We also have another section which is Section 211, that customary law must be applied where it exists. And those two portions are very important. In 2014, 2015, South Africa signed the Covenant on Political and Civil Rights and the Covenant on Economic and Cultural Rights. So that places an obligation on the state to make a right in terms of its indigenous people. There's a legal obligation on the state that every year they need to report to a certain structure. What progress have they made? And these funny pieces of legislation that they've now developed, like Act 3 of 2019, the Traditional and Khoisan Act, is the way to say to the international community, but we do recognize indigenous people, but we give them a different identity. Me as a Nama person must now confide to be recognized as a cultural person. I must now be called a Khoi San person because the legislation says so. They don't recognize me as a Nama person. They say you are recognized as a Khoisan person. That is totally different identity. There's the issue of the Richtersveld. We keep on coming back to the same thing. When Namibia became independent, it adopted Article 140. Article 140 said basically that Namibia as a country will take South African laws and they will use that laws until it is repealed by the judiciary system or by parliament. Now here's the conundrum. In 1998, when the Richtersveld community took the matter to the court, they inserted in the court documents a portion that talks about Richtersveld Suid and Richtersveld North. Richtersveld Suid is the area from the Orange River down Port Nolloth, and Richtersveld North is from the Orange River to on the other side of Bethani, which is on Namibian side. Ordinarily, people would say, but now we have a problem because South Africa cannot engage in a sovereign country. But there's another conundrum. In 1972, the South African government adopted legislation, which is Act 79 of 1972, the Namaland Consolidation Act. And in that legislation, they consolidated the whole of the southern part into that Namaland Consolidation Trust. But it was done by South African Parliament. If you now take that, the Namibian Constitution under Article 140 say we adopt that legislation, that will stay alive until our Parliament repeal it or the judiciary system. And they've only done that in 2018. In fact, they haven't repealed the legislation. They have put it under a list of, they call it legislation that is not no more in use. But they've never repealed that legislation. So when the Constitutional Court, in fact the Supreme Court of Appeals, dealt with the matter, the fact that it was South African legislation gave South African Supreme Court of Appeal jurisdiction in Namibia because of Article 140. And then the Constitutional Court of South Africa made that ruling that binds Richtersveld South and Richtersveld North into one court ruling. So the conundrum is the Namibian people are not aware that they are now bound in South African Constitutional Court ruling. Which means that the people in the southern part is not Namibian citizens anymore. They are now bound to part of South African. And I can imagine that when the legal guys start to realize they have geslaap op die job. They've never paid attention to repeal it both on South African side or on Namibian side. Now, in the Namibian constitution, it says that legislation are made same to South African side, it needs to go through a public participation process before you can make a law. And they haven't done it both on Namibian side and not on South African side. That means that piece of legislation are still alive. And one day, I have a very funny feeling that somebody would take the matter to the court for ratification. And the implications of that, I'm not too sure how that's going to play out. Thank you.
JP?
Thank you, Dr. Kaup. Okay, now, it's going to work the following way. We have 20 minutes, 6 o'clock, the elders are starting on the other side, and I will not be responsible for having kept people away from Ms. Valerie Isaacs. Now, what will happen is that you will each have 3 minutes You have heard the conversation from the floor. You have heard the conversation of everyone. You have 3 minutes to round up and give your final thoughts. Go ahead.
Yes, so solution-based to today and to this discussion. I created a project called, it's a Trainers of Trainers project, meaning I would like to take on youth from organizations and equip them. When I say organizations, I am very sorry. There is no funding for communities no more. So the funding I get from people like Culture Survival that really believes in developing these youth, I'm starting with organizations. I feel that we have youth working for organizations and they could do better with more equipment in the mind. We have physical things. So by September, I'm starting this. JP will be there. We'll be running panel discussions from the farm as well on sustainability. And yes, even though you all are listening to us talking all these things, we are looking for unity. We are, but not without talking this way. We are looking for unity. We are also doing, how can I say, trauma work. Some of us has to speak this, but there is solutions. Don't just think we're complaining. Don't just think that we are running our mouth. There is actually solutions. We even have a revival art camp where Nama children, artists, not normal people, artists that's struggling, could come to the gallery and actually sell their paintings not for 500 Rand. See, that's one of the problems. I'm into intellectual property. That paintings in that room, none of them should be priced like that. No one is qualified to give that things a price. There's certain people who can, and that price is wrong. In India, I just saw the new value of art. A woman that comes from exactly the same background as you is taking her culture and making 25,000 rupees per painting. That's almost 10, 15,000 Rand. I mean, like really, why are we selling that? It's because that artist wasn't taught about his rights. I have photography that I have. I'm no more going to sell it because I'm taught about hanging fees, contracts, leases. I'm no more going to sell my art. I'll never sell my art anymore because now my photography can get a lease from a hotel or a lease from a B&B or a millionaire that just wants the painting for his party and wants it off the next day. These are the type of contracts I want to teach these children. I want to introduce them to environmentalists, sisters like this. Her study is actually so close to who we are because that's the only argument we have, the bloodline. She is valuable in my camps, my trainers of trainers, because one of those kids can go do her work after that and go study. We need places where they can do internship. Other than NTLA's office or here volunteering, they need to get out of the border. I always believe what my grandmother said, if you made trouble in the kitchen, don't fix it in the kitchen, go to the next room because that energy is still there. Gaan in die kamer in. En so te die. That was hier gestaan. So it's about taking these youth from organizations and these artists that's struggling into a more relaxed environment, less political. They don't need to use their money, but come and learn and develop what they have or find other interests by professionals. That is what is important. So First Skin Gallery will be in Cape Town at Pakalani Retreats. Very, very, very nice 5-star place. Because I'm not going to go put my people and their art in just any room. I'm selecting the, how can I say, the value already. It might go to Germany after that, and India, and Japan. That's where I'd be proud to say, that's Nama art. That shirt is in Japan, not on somebody. No, it's hanging on the lease. It's coming back home.
Okay. Thank you very much, Q. Nico, you have 3 minutes. I hope you are not, but I forgot, Africans. I nearly said Botswana is on another timeline. They will take less time. Go ahead, Nico. Your final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts, JP, it's really that as the Khoikhoi and the San, and specifically the Nama in which today perhaps are most the numbered audience, to keep going. Every person, from individuals to organizations to events organizers, we have a role to play. Let us use cultural festivals and these gatherings to reflect on the achievements that we made, because celebrating culture is one thing, but making impact that shape policies and legal frameworks is another. And that is where I think we need to offer solidarity in its highest form. And also, as NGOs and other organizations really invest in capacity building, because we are part of the global community, and we need to be informed, and we need to know where we make impact in terms of
Well, that's other people's. We should come up with indigenous telecommunication apps so other people's apps do not do that to us. Larry, final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I want to start off my closure by saying this. I'm a Christian before I'm anything, first and foremost. I know my Maker. And I want to bring in this saying in the Bible. It says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." If we cannot equip ourselves with the right knowledge to take this battle forward, we will fail. We will succeed by empowering ourselves with solutions, with knowledge, and that's how we're going to change our disposition. When we're dealing with, because I hear, and it's coming from a lot of Namibian people, South Africa's laws are different, your laws say that, fine. What I've mentioned about the Richtersveld case, and that is a very fundamental, and I encourage people to read it, is there was no legislation in place that could enable that. But the Constitutional Court had to uphold justice, consider what was put before the court, and make a decision on that. So what I've said earlier on is we have to be able to study the laws and the constitutions and international law. And in fact, the African charters are binding on South Africa and Namibia. UNDRIP is not binding. I agree with what has been said regarding that, but there are things that are binding. So how do we use these different documents that exist, that our people don't even know exist? How do we use these any document, any law, any legislation, how do we use that to our advantage? What is the goal that we want to achieve at the end of the day, and how do we achieve it? I'm not going to look at the things that prevent me from reaching my destination. I'm going to find the tools that enable me to get there. So I'm saying, and I have all the confidence in the world to say what I'm saying, whether people believe what I'm saying here or not, that's your prerogative. But I'm telling you, Larry, Varrie, we are in court, we know what it is we are pursuing, because we know anything in court is dependent on how you interpret that very legislation and the laws. And you have a duty to interpret it to your benefit. You can't make a case against your case that you're making in court. You find the rules and the clauses and the sections to substantiate your argument. So I came here from South Africa to Namibia to tell you this one thing. The law is the tool. It's the tool that you can use. Parliament, I hope is it called a parliament? Yes, it has parliament, right? They can write whatever laws they want to write. And there may not be certain provisions in the Constitution. I heard another thing that was mentioned is this is a compromise constitution. I can tell you there's probably no other country that has a more compromised constitution than South Africa's constitution. I have read the Namibian constitution, by the way. Right? South Africa is also compromised. Section 25 of South Africa's constitution is a compromised section of the constitution. And therefore, the state's case was whether the community is benefited. I heard the gentleman said, "Oh, the Skalgat millionaires." Yes, I know it's a painful thing. But what did the court rule on the matter when there was no legislation? There's something called jurisprudence. When there's laws that don't give effect, legislation that doesn't give effect to certain things, the court looks at how they previously dealt with certain things. Now, even more an important point to consider is the court had nothing to look from when it came to the Richtersveld case and what the people's case was to the court, that they own the right without the title deeds, without any legislation that gives effect to that. They still won the case. So my encouragement here today is, how can we find, where must we look to find solutions? Let's go, there's information, there's facts, there's case law, there's international covenants, there's treaties, there's declarations, there's all these different documentations. It's now up to us. The onus is on us to find ways to use these things that will enable us to change our disposition. You see, land, and we must never veer away from talking about the land, because alles kom van die land af. Every single thing, if you don't have a place, I'm standing on land where I'm now. If I build a house, I'm building it on land. If I grow plantations, wood, whatever, it's on land. Our primary fight as the first people, we are a Southern African institution. Our primary fight must be about land and our land rights and everything that flows from that. Because once we've changed our status as it pertains to land, trust me, we've changed everything. So let us find the solutions. Let us go and research. Don't just take what you hear. Don't just take what I'm saying. Go read the case. Go read the laws. Go see what it says. If you think your constitution is compromised, go read South Africa's constitution with the sunset clauses and all of those things that are in there. Willing buyer, willing seller. It started with us. Those negotiations. So, in closing, be encouraged by this. There are avenues, there are information, there are resources that you can use that are at your disposal to change your disposition. We have to move away from having a victim mindset that there's nothing that we can do, that they make the laws for us. We are a minority group in South Africa, but yet ons is mos nog nie dom om hof toe te gaan en weet ons gaan die hof saak gaan verloor nie. But we go there with the confidence based on what has been done, not only in South Africa. Go look at the Oji case in Kenya. When there is no binding legislation, there's no legislation that speaks to these things, they still win the case. So we must stop looking at political parties and politicians and parliamentarians to tell us what our rights are. When we have customary law, we must codify our own law. And if the government doesn't work for you, then you move away from the government. We have the right to self-determination. Section 235 of the Constitution of South Africa, Parliament, which is an African majority parliament, a swart mense in the parliament that refused to give effect to Section 235 in the Constitution. So are we going to wait for other people to legislate on our behalf, in our interest? Are we going to wait for them, and when they think about, us and what is in our best interest? They've proven themselves for 30 years they don't have our interest at heart. So we must make a conscious decision now to say, genoeg is genoeg. We are self-determined people. If anything is going to change, it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to us. And once we adopt that mindset and move away from victimhood, you will stay where you are, and you will only have yourself to blame. And I want to make this point also. I'm actually very radical. Ek is baie myself in toom gehou vandag. But I want to make this point. You see, we have to understand the reality of what is happening. And I've said 30 years, South Africa 30 years, or is it 30 years already now? I think so. 36 for Namibia, I think 30 for South Africa, 32. But here's the point. We've waited for so long, hoping that somebody else is going to come and save us. Nobody's going to come and save us. We must save ourselves, right? So there is an ongoing conversation about secession in South Africa. Secession is breaking away from South Africa as it is because it doesn't benefit us. Now, I'm not saying this that I'm pro or against it. What I'm saying is we must begin to think about what is in our best interest. Because niemand dink vir ons nie. Nobody's thinking about what is our best interest. We must now decide. Codesa was something that happened in South Africa. We weren't even at the table at Codesa when they wrote the Constitution. And I'm sure the very same thing happened here in Namibia. So are we going to sit back and wait up until somebody does something for us? Ons kan dit nie doen nie.
Yes.
It will be a denial of a right to our children. And I want to say this, and I want to be unambiguous in it. Ek is nie bang vir, I told you, I spoke to the president, in fact, Namibia, South Africa. If you watch the national dialogue last year in South Africa, I was the one that went on the stage and told them, die ding gaan nie gebeur hier nie. I stopped the national dialogue with Cyril Ramaphosa there, and we made a meeting where they had to come with resolutions to say, this is how we're going to solve the Khoisan issue in South Africa. Ons wag nie vir hulle nie. Ons gaan, ons vang hulle by die keel and say, hey, you're going to change this thing, or we'll change it ourselves. So we have to become radical. There's never been a time, this is the point I wanted to make, sorry. There's never been a time in the world where what we are asking for has come peacefully. Never, ever. There's not one single example you can show me where peace has been negotiated without ultimate compromise. South Africa was pushed into sanctions for them to get. White people held a referendum between themselves to give. South Africa wasn't won by war. This is why we struggle where we struggle. In Namibia, same story. So we have to now come to the point where we realize we've tried talking to these people for 30 years. Varrie. If you see what's happening in South Africa now, people have decided with this xenophobia stuff, ons is nie deel van hy goede nie. But what the point with this is, the people have decided whether government does something or not. They've taken up a stand to say, we are the people and we the people shall govern. If we realize and recognize van die Kaap op tot by die suidelike punt van Namibia as waar ons is. If we can recognize and understand we can have political power, we can govern ourselves, nobody has to prescribe laws for ourselves, we must make decisions and act in our interest, because this thing that we're fighting for has never come peacefully. Never come through talking nicely, government, doen die vir my, doen die vir my. It hasn't happened. So is ons dom? Are we fools to go? They say a fool is the only one that does something twice and expect a different result. Are we fools for expecting and hoping something is going to change, doing the same thing for 30 years? Ons is mos nou maar baie dom as ons 30 jaar dieselfde ding doen. So, this is my landing point, sorry.
Thank you.
My landing is let us reach this place of understanding if anything is going to change here, we must make that change a reality. Whatever is going to cost us, you see, people have died in the past for this little bit of freedom that we have now. But they've understood everything comes with a price. What are you willing to pay for this thing that you want? That's the question you must ask yourself. I want to say this organization that we have, the First Nation Advocacy and Litigation Fund, is an organization, an institution that is there to go, and we've realized that nobody is there are lawyers, there's so few lawyers in South Africa. I'm not a lawyer by profession, I never studied. I went up against the best lawyers, Silks and senior counsel in South Africa. Ons is nie bang vir hulle nie, because we know who we are and what our rights are. This organization that we have, we've now taken that responsibility upon ourselves, because like I said, if anything's going to change, it's up to us. So we then incorporate this organization and said, we will go to courts ourselves and go and fight it, whether people fund us or don't fund us, ons gaan ons regte, we're going to exercise those rights. So we are here, we're going to have a conversation even with Dirk to see how we can even, because we're a Southern African organization, we are not divided by these colonial borders, where we can take hands and say, right, we're going to change the same thing here in South Africa, in Namibia. Let's inspect the laws and all these things that are there. And how can we change it? Let's become solution-orientated. Ons ken die probleme. Hoeveel jare moet ons oor die probleem praat? Wanneer doen ons iets aan die probleem? So we are there. We're here to take hands. We're here to build relationships. We are one people. I said it earlier. Moenie sê ons en julle nie. Almal wat ek nou gehoor het sê, ons kom van die Noord-Kaap. South Africa is your land. It's your land in South Africa. The minerals that are being pulled there, the benefits that everybody, the Europeans that come there, are eating off of your minerals. So that is the message I'm bringing to you. We are one people. We can change this thing. It's up to us. We are here. It's up to you whether you will take that step and move forward. Thank you.
Larry, the next time. The Nama Festival is unapologetic. And one of the things that I've learned about the festival over the years of doing panel work with them is we are not apologetic about what we say. So please, when you come back next year, you must be open from the first day. Yeah? We want to hear this radicalism from the whole day. Ne?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. Yes, doctor?
Hoe moet ek nou praat
The
na
person
Larry?
with our blood history.
Ek verstaan nou nie, hoe moet ek nou praat na Larry? Ek wil dan ook nou take up arms hier, so nou. But you said three things at the beginning. We are rich, we are powerful, and what was the other thing? It's our time, and I agree with that. It is our time. I just want to say one thing before I get to my closing remarks. So I told you earlier, I'm part of the Namibian team. We negotiate in Geneva about these international treaties and everything. The person that the entire World Health Organization is most, hulle bewe eintlik as sy instap, is Reverend Dr. Kauna Schroeder van hierdie se Keetmans, né? They look up. I mean, those of you that know her know she has an aura about her. But she is the person that they look to when anyone says anything on the floor. She is the one that they want to discuss positions with. She stopped the negotiations midway, point of order. We're not continuing. Switzerland, yeah, can we just no, we are point of order. Ek gaan nie voort totdat julle luister wat ek te sê het nie op hierdie point of order. So a girl from Keetmans is the one who stops negotiations at the World Health Organization. I want you just to realize that fact. I spoke earlier about the blood. And the blood is in the soil, the blood is in the plants, the blood is the culture. You have to remember, like Larry said, we are the first people. The Europeans, everyone else wants to understand, how did these first people survive? What is in their DNA, right? And this is why I brought up the fact that you yourself is also a biological sample, biological resource. So when you discuss whatever you discuss about your heritage, about your knowledge, know that you are the most important resource. Whether it is your mind, whether it is your medicine, whether it is the way that you think, the way that you live, that is a resource in of itself. And I want to speak to the youth as well to say that you've heard now from two experts here. Learn the laws. Learn the culture. To the Youth Council, and I know that the traditional leaders are also thinking about establishing the Center of Excellence. We need to be able to document our knowledge. We need to be able to document our stories, our history. Mr. Koper, who was just here talking about the histories that they are collecting. We need to be able to prove, because the burden of proof is on us, unfortunately. Even if the laws don't exist, the burden of proof is still there. So you have to learn what you don't even know. You don't even know what you don't even know, but you have to go and figure that out. Because we need to study, like Larry said, we need to explore other cultures to look at the examples. How have they gained what we have lost, right? And we need to realize the power that we sit with. We are not Vloerlappe. Yeah, our land was taken away from us. We were forcefully displaced. It was never returned, and it may never be returned unless we stand up and we learn how to take that land back. And I'm not a militant person, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I know that there has to be different ways of approaching it, because like Larry said, if the way that you've approached it has not worked, then you need to approach it in a different way. And like these plants, and I heard someone saying something about die droë land, and it was in the previous panel where they spoke about how destitute the land is. But the medicinal plants that we lived from, that our forefathers lived from, grew in these desolate places. And that should tell you about the Nama people and the Nama culture, is that we are able to grow in places that others cannot. We are resilient. And so we have to embody that as a people, as an individual as well, and say that we are resilient and we can take this forward and we can achieve whatever we want to achieve if this and this are there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. There's one message that has been a DNA across this conversation. Nico has said it, Doctor has just said it, Larry has said it, Q has said it. We may not get back fully what we have lost. It may not happen now, and our fights may be long and dreary for us to get back to the space of getting back what we've lost. But there's one thing that we're agreeing on, that it'll be over dead bodies, that what we have now, we will lose. That it'll be over dead bodies that laws are created and consultations that are absent from our communities happen, and we sit and look. It'll be over dead bodies that we allow what had happened in the past and our exploitation to continue. That's an agreement. Even if it means we leave diplomacy and blood spills. That is what we are willing as young people to sacrifice. Because that's what we understand, that's what our elders have taught us. And that's the place that we come from. And that's why we are willing to lay down our lives, as our ancestors did, to protect this space and to protect our identity. I'm a Tay child, and the land upon which you sit is my land. Thank you.